Hey everyone, today we are joined by a star of the National Wrestling Alliance. He's been involved in wrestling for close to 3 decades, and he's a former NWA Worlds Heavyweight Champion who fans can hear every week on NWA Power and oftentimes NWA USA. There we go. I didn't have that in the notes, but I wanted to add it, and I forgot to put it back in the notes. Tim Storm, sir, thank you so much for joining us for part 2. I'm so excited to have you back on.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. It's I told you this last time, and I truly feel this way. I feel like this is a team effort. I mean, we support each other because we want professional wrestling to be as successful as it can be.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. Like, I know a lot of podcasts can have a bad reputation, especially like the quote unquote shoot interview days, because we know what sells. Negativity sells. And
Sure.
Look, if negativity is part of somebody's story, I'll never shy away from it. But the point of the story isn't to get, these outlandish reactions. Just tell your story, and hopefully it's a good story, and hopefully we're sharing love for wrestling because, as a fan and fans watching, that's what we're here for. And as a wrestler, most wrestlers are in it because they loved it to begin with.
Absolutely. Well, and I even on that point, it's the term shoot interview, I think, has changed. As you know, I'm a teacher, so I'm the beginning of or the middle of my second week of summer vacation, and I find myself watching a lot of podcasts or memory things. And anyway, I go back and watch shoot interviews from 20 years ago was we want you to say everything negative about everybody. And today, shoot interview really is any interview about wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of that is also, and I can be as guilty as this as anyone. If you put shoot interview in the title, you're going to get more views.
Right.
That's just the way it is. But also, you're 100% right. And I think, I don't want to say people took advantage of it, but I think a lot of the shoot interviews, like you said, they were people who were, cashing in on negativity to try to get controversy. And again, all the respect to them. If that's what they want to do, go for it.
Right.
But also, I think in some cases, guys wanted to drum up attention too. I'm in my opinion, Honky Tonk Man was probably a great example of this, where Jim Cornette, they knew how to get people talking. And in some cases still do. And all the power to them for doing it. Just try to do something a little different here.
And I support that 100%. I'm a very positive person. So
absolutely. And you're a delight. We've had only a couple people on the channel. It's multiple guests so far. In the future, we're hoping to have Tyler Bateman on again, Brian Kendrick on again. But Sal Renaro, 3-time guest, Captain Johnny Yuma, 2-time. And now you join the category as a 2-time. And thank you so much for your time. Where can people check you out?
Tim Storm or T-Storm01 for Instagram, and Tim Storm for Real Tim Storm for Twitter. That's pretty much, that's my whole, that's what I do. And I think I told you this last time is that I will most likely, at whatever point I'm done with wrestling, I'll probably delete social media or at least, become inactive on it because I really don't, I want the positivity. So that's what I'm all about.
Absolutely. And look, there's a lot of positive things that can come from social media, but we know there's a lot of negativity that can come there.
Well, it is a necessary thing for wrestling today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Marketing shows, marketing yourself, and ironically, a lot of communication on bookings and those kind of things come through those messages. So a lot of positive things can, and I stay away from the negative personally. So
I love it.
You won't see any of my personal, whatever, political or any other opinions on that, because to me, that's not my platform to do that.
It's a business. It's entertainment. That's what you use it for. It's a business, and I respect that. And guys, there will be links in every video and in the description of each video. Plus, at the end, there's a graphic. Make sure to follow Tim. Make sure to support him, and make sure to support the National Wrestling Alliance. This podcast has had a lot of National Wrestling Alliance stars and employees and workers on it. And, we just want to keep the business growing. We want to support it. And I appreciate everybody who's offered their time to the channel. So make sure to show that support back to them.
Absolutely.
Now, we're doing something a little different. Before we get to all the questions, I did ask for some viewer questions. I did it last minute, so we don't have a ton, which is good because we don't have that much time anyway. But there's a few questions we were asked from people on YouTube. And, I do a lot of research on these, and I ask an abundance of questions, as you know, which is why I have to do 2 interviews, 3 interviews to get through people's careers. But, there's some stuff I wouldn't think to ask. For example, a YouTuber, a subscriber, Kiro Tozawa, and not the real one, I don't think, he asked, Has Tim Storm ever competed in Japan or in a JoJo? Have you ever gone to Japan? And if not, was that something you were ever wanting to do, hoping to do, and just travel abroad in general? Like, you have a lot of wrestlers who like to travel to England, this and that, but you have your job, like you have your profession away from that. So was that even anything you wanted to do?
Yes and yes. I mean, it's absolutely something that I have had some opportunity to do. I look at my other job almost as it's something I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
There in my heart, there's nothing else I want to do besides wrestle. I mean, and that's the way it's always been for me. If I've done it for stretches at a time where I've done nothing but wrestle, and if I could have my way, that's what I would be doing all the time. I defended the NWA Worlds Heavyweight Championship in Japan, and I think probably, I don't want to give a percentage. I'm sure that changes all the time, but I think every wrestler wants to do that, or wants to go to Japan. And some of us would love to go on a regular basis. Some want to do it once. It's like going to to the holy lands of wrestling. It's a different world there as far as how wrestling has been perceived in the past. And I know it's over the last 10 years, we've kind of seen a little transition on that. But yeah, I've wrestled in some small areas of Mexico, Canada, Nigeria.
Oh, that's so cool.
Japan. I would have loved to do. Japan was a wonderful experience, and I got to do that again. Well, I don't know how this comes up every time. So, James, if you end up watching, my friend James Beard, who I seem to bring up in every not intentionally, it's just he's been such an integral part in my wrestling career and just a good friend. He was the, I don't know what his official term was, official title under the Bruce Tharpe era of the NWA. But Bruce, James, I defended the NWA World title there. The NWA tag titles were defended there all on one show. And it was just an incredible experience.
And what promotion did you say this was for?
That's a great question.
No worries.
I honestly can't remember it. One of the things, I think I was actually talking to JR Kratos this week during our TV tapings, and I know that he and Homicide are going, and we were just coming up in the next couple of weeks, but we were talking about wrestling in Kurikan Hall, and I didn't get to do that. And that would be something that I would have loved to do. And there's other venues, but that's like, from our hotel room where we were sitting, we could see, it was out our window, we could see that. And, I would have loved to have done that. This was a smaller promotion, and I'll show my really lack of memory. This is how deep I get. I think it had the word diamond in it. Okay, that's all I got. I honestly can't remember.
It's such a cool opportunity, and I'm very glad you did. I wish I had that in my notes, because I definitely would have talked about it more and did a little more research. But I just think it's super cool that you got to experience that, because again, so much of your success came so much later in your career, and that's what I find so fascinating. Like the same thing, like I said, we talked to Tyler Bateman, and he's been a great guest, great guy, and he got into Ring of Honor in New Japan after almost 15, 18 years in wrestling. And your story is similar, where you really took off in the end. Like, you were already part of the NWA, but the NWA and your role in it really started taking off so much later. So I just think it's so fascinating to see all those opportunities come later on. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Great experience. I mean, it's because of the history of professional wrestling in Japan, their respect, the way they approach it, the fandom in general, it's taken to a different level. Yeah, I know, even like just arriving at the hotel and getting off, getting out of the shuttle or whatever we were on, there were already fans waiting. And, we have a lot of fans in the United States, but these fans knew who was going to be there, where they were wrestling. I would call them almost storyboards or collector's items they have prepared for each person. I wrestled a guy I believe was Hama, I think is the way it's pronounced, but he was a former sumo, former MMA guy, and it was a good experience overall. You know, I mean, it's that when I got there, they asked I have my music, but they very specifically wanted me to come out to what they termed the NWA music that Harley Race and everybody else came out to. And as a fan of the history of wrestling, that hit home with me.
Oh, that's cool.
I really felt like coming through the curtains, I was fully prepared not to be a fan favorite because I was wrestling a Japanese wrestler in Japan, and there was a huge reaction. And I won't say it was. It might have been 50-50. It might have even been a little more in my favor. And I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, an American coming in against someone who was a fairly well-known wrestler in Japan that's Japanese. I thought, okay, I'm going to be prepared for it. But I wasn't prepared for the positive entrance I got.
That's super cool. That's super. And that just shows how likable you are. The fact that translates in any language, in any country. It's very cool. Another question, and this comes from Instagram user Fuzz999, who he's a big NWA fan. He's offered support for the channel before. And this is kind of a silly question, but at the same time, I think a lot of people agree. We all want to know his tanning regimen. So you have the best tan in wrestling. How does it happen, if you don't mind letting people know real quick?
No, it's funny because that's kind of an ongoing joke at the NWA. And I've told people, I'm very self-deprecating, especially with my close friends. And, at this point, my ongoing joke is, that's what I got left is my tan. That's my gimmick. And it's there are certain guys, Tom Latimer, Jordan Clearwater, and it's almost like a running, we see each other and we're immediately comparing to see. I tried to bequeath that to Tom Latimer and say, okay, I'm out of the competition now that I'm a, pretty much full-time commentator. But, even this last weekend at the pay-per-views, he was like, I really thought I had you this time. I mean, he'll send me something from vacation with his wife in wherever in Mexico. And he's looking incredibly dark. And, he'll say, I'm coming to get you, and I just calmly I like the sun. I've got a small in Texas. I grew up in Arkansas. In Arkansas, nobody had pools. You had to be very wealthy, but in Texas, there's a lot of pools. It's just kind of a thing. So, I may go. It's all natural. I don't spray tan. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. Natural. Here, natural. Tanning bed a couple times a week, and during the summer, I know I'm getting dark when I start getting a little bit of a purple tinge, and I haven't been out in the sun other than working in my backyard this summer yet, but I'll get there.
Super cool. And Jordan, his improvement in wrestling has been incredible. He's someone I want to get on the channel. And then Tom, what can you say about him? He's great. I'd love to talk to him in the future too. So really cool names that I haven't spoken to yet, but I'd love to.
I intentionally make it a point on every TV taping, whatever. I believe, and he's a friend. But I believe Tom Latimer is one of the best wrestlers in the world today.
Oh, yeah, he's great. He's great. I need to go out of my way to definitely contact him soon because hopefully he does interviews. I know a lot of guys don't like to, and I understand why, but I would definitely love to chat with him. Okay, just a couple more questions from viewers. Wayfarer Mooney has two, which are interesting. The first one is, has there ever been a match that you were booked for or that, you heard rumblings of that you hope to see happen, but it never did? I don't know if maybe.
No, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Is the answer. I mean, I know that the first was, I'm going to make sure I get this right. There was a point where I had I don't know, I guess a regional title. We talked a little bit about traditional championship wrestling.
Yep.
And I had their heavyweight title, and they had booked a Iron Man match against Adam Pearce, who at the time had the NWA World title.
All right.
And I was excited about that happening. The possibilities of doing something like that. would have been a lot of fun. And just, I honestly don't remember. I don't know if it was injury or scheduling or something, but that didn't happen.
Oh, that would have been great. Yeah,
I
you
would have,
two
I
would have
would,
been
well, I
awesome.
like him as a person, just a, great person. So I would have enjoyed that. And I'm sure there's probably quite a few that didn't happen, but that's just wrestling.
Yeah. And Adam Pearce, he's a channel favorite. Everybody talks so glowingly about him. Sal Renaro, Johnny Yuma, those are two guys who they got a lot of advice from Adam Pearce over the years, and he's been so given. And now the position he's in, he's doing so well in professional wrestling. So I definitely would have loved to see you two work. But I'm glad that you two had a friendly relationship. I didn't know that.
We've met a handful of times, and the times that we've talked through messaging or social media, usually it's very much more, hey, I really appreciate you being so positive on social media. And it's kind of that, and that's about it. I mean, we haven't, I would be great to say, oh, we've visited for hours. We haven't, but I like him as a person.
Great person and performer. So what more can you ask for, right?
100%. Yeah.
Wayfarer Mooney on YouTube also asked, does Tim have a Mount Rushmore of wrestling? Now, this could be, I guess these things depend on how people look at it, right? Sometimes it can be the greatest. Sometimes it can be your favorite. It can be your influence. Yeah. If you have one, what would it be?
Probably easier if I talk about my favorites, because boy, I can just feel the category teacher in me wanting to get into this. But it's like, when you say who is the greatest of all time, to me, you can't, that's not a fair question. Who's the greatest entertainer? Who drew the most money? Who's the greatest big man? Who's the best technical wrestler? And I think all of those, and at one point on a road trip for 14 hours, we put together some type of rubric and gave point systems to each one of those and tried to come up with something. But I grew up a big Harley race fan. And at the time, really didn't know why I did. I look back now and I appreciate how real, because everything about him was real.
So genuine.
Dusty Rhodes was a huge influence. That's just, if I had to pick my all-time favorite, he would be at the top. And which is, again, I think you and I got into this a little bit last time. Looking back at when I was whatever age I was watching, I couldn't have told you that he didn't have the best body in the biz. I didn't care. Those things didn't fit into my, into my brain. Kerry Von Erich, and not necessarily from necessarily a technical wrestling standpoint, but charisma and obviously, a big body guy. And
there was something that people just gravitated towards him. Yeah. It's almost hard to put your finger on it. I guess it's the it factor, right? Where he just had that it factor that, it was like Beatlemania almost, for the Von Erichs. It's wild.
Oh, well, they were beyond, they were celebrities locally. I mean, they were the top of the food chain on famous people in the state of Texas. And I was living in Arkansas at the time. So but I just was drawn to that. Never got the chance to, unfortunately, to meet, but I was in certain areas of Texas. I used the claw, specifically Denton County, which is home of the Von Erichs. And,
oh, that's cool. That's cool.
That's just that's a lot of what I do is kind of an ode to, the greats that I consider great. And then I think without a doubt, Undertaker.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought I was going to struggle with as world champion is, and boy, my mind now is spinning with other greats, but one of the things that I thought I would, how do you, when you go into an area or territory, when you're defending the world title, you don't know who you're facing. You don't know if it's their top face, their top heel, and you have to be able to adjust to those things. And James told me, he goes, well, don't work face or heel, work world champion.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And I said, yeah, but what is that? He goes, well, what does Undertaker do? He goes out and he's the Undertaker. He doesn't matter if he's face or heel. So I may smile a little bit more, if the fans are cheering, but you're going to see the same stuff either way. I'm going to work the same. And I borrowed some old Luthez stuff, where he would take a completely unnecessary, seemingly cheap shot, an elbow coming off a tie up in the ropes, and all of a sudden the fans are booing you, and you
Mhm.
didn't really do anything illegal anyway. So anyway, that would be my Mount Rushmore for me, my personal favorites.
So Harley Race, Kerry Von Erich, Dusty Rhodes, and The Undertaker. That's an impressive four. And I,
Yeah,
like you said, there's going to be more in your head, but still, that's
yeah.
an impressive four. One last fan question before we get back to everything else. This is from Dexter Montana on YouTube, and he said, "I subscribed originally for Tim Storm. Thank you for that. You all discussed the evolution of wrestling with lucha in Japan influence, but one thing you didn't cover was hardcore wrestling, deathmatch wrestling, and backyard wrestling. Tim was wrestling during the peak of backyard wrestling when it became really popular. That was what, like 99, 2000, I think. Did he see much of it in Texas? I think at that point you were still in Arkansas. I could be mistaken of the timeline.
Let's see. This is 22. I think I had moved here.
Okay.
Yes, backyard specifically. I was fortunate that I don't know. It's there's two trains of thought on that. It's like I remember there was a time when some of the local promoters, bigger promoters here, we're trying to put together maybe I don't know, a council and say let's get I'll use myself, but it wasn't aimed at me at the time. Don't lend your name to make a backyard promotion, because by doing that you're lowering not your personal value, but your value to my promotion.
Mm,
My, the other side of that is, okay, that's great, but you're not booking me, constantly. If
yeah,
I can make money when I go there, then shouldn't I do that? Um, so I was fortunate that I was booked pretty regularly with some really really good promotions, and still most of them I still have relationships with. As far as hardcore and all that kind of stuff, we hit on at least this term, different flavors of ice cream.
absolutely.
Some people love that. I never really considered it hardcore, but I guess looking back on it, we were very. I told you that when I first came to Texas, we got involved with PCW, Professional Championship Wrestling, in a group with Lance Archer Hoyt as our leader, and we were very very dark. Believe it or not, I don't think I've ever been. I wouldn't be considered goth, but it was a really dark group called the Dark Circle, and our trademark was blowing fire when we came in, and it was very much a very tables, and it was a very violent style. And I look back now and go, that was pretty hardcore. But at the time, I was like, okay, we're just being physical, and we know we're big heels, and that's what we do. So, hey, different flavors of ice cream. If you love it, you love it. If you don't, that's okay.
Absolutely. And I mean, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, did you ever see a lot of Memphis when you were younger? I mean, I know in retrospect you have, but like,
Yeah,
because I mean, that's where before ECW, the hardcore style in the United States was really a Memphis thing. You had the
yeah.
Moondogs and everyone going crazy with the concession stand brawls. So,
I only laugh. Man, who was I'm drawing a blank, but I did a oh, okay. Josephus and I
you know,
did an empty arena match for the NWA at Impact, and we really tried to give a kind of a nod to the greats, and the that that particular one we were not able to, because they didn't want us to break the popcorn machine and all that kind of stuff, and they were afraid that we would if we got back there. I got Memphis every Saturday morning, and I grew up watching a lot of that. And you blowing fire or throwing fire and all those kind of things. Look back now, pretty violent.
yeah.
I mean, hardcore now, but yeah, I loved Memphis wrestling.
Very cool. And thank you for submitting questions, guys. I know it was pretty last minute. I don't know if for future interviews I'll be doing it any sooner. You know, it's sometimes we have to reschedule last minute. People get busy, things come up. So I'm always careful about doing it. And I have a habit of going long on these things. So sometimes I don't even have time for questions. But thank you guys for that. And thank you for answering them. Now I'll get to the notes. One thing I wanted to touch on, and we talked about you having a match with King Mabel in the last interview, but that wasn't the last time you worked with him. And a big time that came was July 17, 2007. You had what I have listed here as your first match with WWE as an enhancement talent. I don't know if that's accurate. You can correct me, but you took on, oh, was it?
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
It's funny. I was actually talking about this today because my running joke was my 46 seconds of pain. So yeah, it's. But now, so what was your question before I get there? Because I'll start talking and not stop if I don't let you finish. So.
No problem. I made sure to add this to the note just to shout out Captain Yuma's favorite wrestler, which I still love that story to this day. Big Daddy V. Viscera is his favorite wrestler of all time, which I think is awesome. And you had a match with him on ECW. Was that your first? And you said you don't know if that was your first time working with WWE, but what was the experience like?
It was overall, it was a really good experience. You said it. One of my first TV matches was against King Mabel. Some of the first advice I got was earlier than that, before we actually got a chance to work, was with King Mabel. Then he did his, I guess, Viscera part. Then he became Big Daddy V, and this was coming into, for him, the beginning of a monster push, is what they were going for. And who managed him? Matt
Stryker? Yeah, I think Matt Stryker at the time.
The experience was good. He had who knows how many thousands of matches, and I told him, as before we went out, I said, hey, I just want to let you know you were one of my first matches. And it cracks me up now in my own head, but I meant it, and I said, I'm kind of coming full circle because I think I'm getting close to finishing. And if it was in 2007, and boy, I have been saying this for 15 years and it's still true. But I said, hey, I know you're getting your push and I know my role. Don't worry about me. Just be as physical as you want to be. And I probably didn't have to tell him that. I mean, what was he, 6'8", 500 pounds?
Massive.
And he said, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. You make me feel old, which is funny because I'm probably way older than him. And he said, just keep fighting, just keep fighting. And I remember watching it thinking I might have landed 2 punches before he destroyed me, maybe. And those were punches to the gut as he was, and I considered him not a close friend, but a friend. We got to know each other a little bit, before, as we continued. And boy, he took that "don't worry about me" very seriously. It was ironically, and he didn't know this because he could care less, but I was at PCW as a tag champion, and I think he hit me and finished me with all moves that I was using. And I think the whole thing lasted 46 seconds, and I think I came out of there with a dislocated shoulder. And but I was, I learned a lot. Had some good discussions with guys in the back, with agents, and I walked through the curtain. Well, going out, Barry Windham was our agent, who I've always been a big fan of his work. And I watched Vince McMahon say, "What are you guys doing?" And he told him, and he said, "No, we're not doing that." And he rebooked the entire match right at Gorilla before we went out. And then in retrospect, I looked at it and went, wow, he's absolutely right about everything he said. And of course, why would he not be? And then I came back through the curtain, and the first person to meet me and shake my hand on what a great job I did of getting my butt whipped was Dusty Rhodes, who said, "That's a great job. We'd love to have you back." And I was called "This Kid Tim Storm" by Taz on the announce table, which still makes me laugh because I think I was, if it was 2007, I was in my 40s. So
That's great. That's interesting that you took a lesson out of that, because I think a lot of people could look at it as a negative thing, like, oh, we had this plan and then everything got changed. But you look at it as, I got to be quick on my feet and learn, to be able to do that. But also, you have the mindset of, okay, why do they want it changed, and what positives came from that? Like, that's
Well, and let's be honest, it just changed the way I was getting my butt kicked. So it didn't really.
That's true too.
It didn't change it. It didn't change a ton. It was. I mean, it was on presentation things. On here's what. I mean, at the time, I think he was using some type of, I don't know, some kind of chop, but he would make the big V to chop you. And, he's back him in the corner and give him a couple of those. And he said, Vince McMahon said, and what is the crowd going to do? The crowd's going to go, woo. And everybody in the arena is now thinking about somebody besides you that's in the ring.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
I know. And I went, okay, let's learn.
Yeah. Never would have thought about that. I mean, it's a great point, though.
He's why he's been at the top for so long.
That's always been his reputation too. Like, he might not necessarily always be like the big ideas guy, but if somebody comes up with an idea, he knows how to tweak it to get that, to make it that much better. And apparently Triple H has that same magic too. So that's always good to see.
Yeah. I mean, I took the whole thing as a learning experience, and I mean, everybody looks at it as an opportunity, and I definitely got somewhat of an opportunity from there that just didn't work for where I was in life. I felt, but anyway, but it was good.
You talked about Dusty Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
But you said before he's probably your favorite of all time,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to interact with him there. Had you interacted with him much beforehand, after? Like, what's your experience has been with, or was that it?
Very, very, always very limited. He ran some shows in, I think it was Oklahoma, that I got to be a part of. And, he was very much, I don't know, for some reason, I think wrestling too much sometimes. And I was trying to think of what I would consider as the greatest booking minds in professional wrestling history, and that I had interacted with, because I know a lot of people felt like Florida had one of the best of all time, which is where Dusty Rhodes claimed. I mean, where he said, "This is where I got a lot of my."
Yeah, I learned from Eddie Graham.
Yeah, and so a lot of people consider him at the top, but most people would say that Dusty Rhodes was a genius in booking. You didn't ask me, but I think Jake Roberts, psychology-wise, Buck Robley, Kevin Sullivan, I think that all those guys are guys that I've been able to work for, some extensively, and pick their brains. And I would have loved to have had that longer with, to be able to sit down and I know, Tyrus counts Dusty as one of his biggest influences. I guess it was Florida Championship Wrestling at the time, but I would have loved to have the opportunity to learn from somebody from the, just an amazing history.
And then some of those names you talked about learning from, Jake Roberts and Kevin Sullivan, that's such a fountain of knowledge right there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's just never, they know so much. I don't even know that they know how much they know. It's amazing to me.
It kind of just, and that's the thing with the people like that, like, knowledge just kind of drips out of them without like them even intending for it to. If you're willing to learn, you're going to pick up something even without pushing it.
Yep. And if you want to learn and you show that you do, they'll just keep pouring into you.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, I do want to get to the Lightning One era of the NWA, because that's one thing we barely touched on before. But before we get there, you brought him up earlier, and I don't have much in my notes from that period, just because, at that point, the NWA wasn't quite what it became, or what it was before, and what it became later under the Bruce Tharpe era. But could you talk a little about Bruce Tharpe and the NWA in that period? Because obviously we know that's when you would, climb the ranks. But before that happened, like, what were your impressions of Bruce Tharpe? What were your impressions of the NWA at the time? And what was your thought process?
Well, the NWA has always been at the top of professional wrestling for me, as far as just the memories, the history. I really am all about, like, I say it on commentary all the time, and it's legacy, history, respect, and it's what the NWA embodies to me. So I knew that if I ever got an opportunity, that I wanted to be a part of the NWA. And I think you know, somewhere in that first 3 or 4 years in Arkansas, somebody was calling themselves, and it was in Arkansas. So I'm narrowing it down because I had friends that later on used this very legally, but this was not. This was NWA Mid-South, and I think they were just taking the historically some of the biggest federations and putting all the names together. And I was so excited because I was probably, I don't know, 2 years, maybe a year and a half into the business. Now I'm working for the NWA, and I go up, and it's literally classic indie wrestling. It's a gym up in somewhere in the middle of North whatever Arkansas, and there was no affiliation whatsoever. They were just using those letters, but I was so excited to do that. And then when I'm moving here in Texas, the way that system was set up under Bruce Tharpe was they had something like 52 different promotions that fell under that umbrella. And one of them, a guy named Robert Langdon, who I still work for about once a month, in Texoma, right on the border of Texas and Oklahoma. He had the NWA license for part of Oklahoma and part of Texas. And he walked up to me at the time it was called the Red Bastion Shootout. It later becomes the Red River Shootout after Red passes. But he walked up to me, and I'd never met him, and he had a guy that said, introduced me, and he said, "I want you on every show I do for the rest of your life. I want you to be my Kerry Von Erich."
Wow, that's such a cool compliment.
Well, and you you just hit every major, pressure point with me. He was NWA, Kerry Von Erich. I want you to be, and I did. I had had long hair and never been a real small guy. So, but I won the NWA Oklahoma title, the first match out with him. And he's been a big part of my NWA experience. James Beard, a big part of my NWA experience. And a lot of guys have, but Bruce was the owner. And prior to all of that, I really didn't know him, didn't have a relationship with him. But, I won the NWA North American a couple of times. And of course, as the owner, he's approving everything. And all of those are going to, I think I lose the NWA North American to Jack Stane in Las Vegas, and they unify the North American and the National. Then I think he tore a tricep, probably give him, I don't know. I was going to say probably giving me a clothesline because he throws them as hard as he can, but I don't know that it was against me. And then I won it back in a tournament, and then I ended up beating Jax later for the NWA World title at Texoma. So, you have to trust somebody, and you have to believe in somebody to let them carry the torch for your company. And Bruce was good to me, and Bruce made that decision, where I remember writing him an email saying, this is where I want to go. If I appreciate everything you've done for me. And if you don't ever see me as your world champion, I can appreciate that. But I want you to know that I would love the opportunity to carry that torch. And, he let it, made it happen. And thankfully it became and it still is the pinnacle of my wrestling life.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because that's exactly where we're going to go next with it. And obviously, I was going to say you got it, but as if you wouldn't get it. Tim Storm defeats Jack Stane for the NWA Worlds Heavyweight Championship, NWA Texoma, on October 21st, 2016 in the Elks Lodge, in Sherman, Texas, USA. What an incredible moment that had to be for you.
Oh, it was great. There were some leaders in the organization, and all of those had to basically give me the stamp of approval because you don't make that choice lightly. I had quite a few shots at that title over the years. I think you and I talked about it. One of my second or third year, I wrestled for that title against Dan Severn, wrestled AJ Styles when he had it. So I had several opportunities, and I had probably been beaten 3 times in really good matches. If you like physical wrestling, Jax and I learned that we could just destroy each other. And that's the way we went at every match. So, Jax came to my home turf, Texoma, and, it's an Elks Lodge. They seem, a lot of them look alike, but we actually talked about that this weekend, Jax and I, sitting up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And, it was one of the biggest crowds we'd ever had. It was standing room only. They were solidly behind me, which is a great feeling, to do that on your home turf. And James Beard was the referee. Had a lot of my friends there, so it was, it was a big moment, and it was a very emotional moment. I'm check myself here because this is not, but I feel emotion when I think about it now.
That's awesome.
I knew that night I didn't have a clue how long I would have that championship, but I knew I was on a list of the greatest names in my name, at least in my mind. And again, there are a lot of great wrestlers that didn't hold that title and were fantastic, but I knew they couldn't take my name off that list.
Yeah,
if I had it
forever.
if I had it for like Giant Baba and had it for a week or whatever, 3 days or whatever he had it. Perry Von Erich didn't hold it very long, but I knew they couldn't take my name off the list. And a lot of people looked at that like, what year did you say? 2016?
2016, yep, October.
A lot of people at that time in 2016 said this is kind of the pat on the back. Good job, Tim Storm. We appreciate you as you roll off into the sunset. Probably a short-term title run, and it turned into over a year. And the Lightning One era starts during that, which is a really big reason why I continue to move forward with it.
And just as a full circle thing, you talked about James being the referee. You talked about being in front of people who loved you, and you just mentioned earlier in 2007, 9 years prior, you were talking about retiring, and you told us in the prior interview, I think it was like 2001, 2002, you contemplated and did retire for maybe a year, 6 months, 8 months, and you had all these stops and starts, but it had to be so fulfilling to finally reach, such a pinnacle. Because again, you grew up with the NWA, you grew up idolizing the NWA champion. So for you to have the moment, not to try to make you emotional right here by making you think about it even more, but it's such a. This is why I love this. This is why I love doing this, because I love these moments. That's what makes you love wrestling.
I'm passionate about wrestling. I'm not passionate about a lot of things. I'm generally speaking. It's annoying sometimes, but I'm very level, very even keeled. I try to keep everything on, I don't, not highs, not lows. That was definitely a high point. And like you said, I've said from the beginning, I grew up loving the NWA. I marked out for going to someplace in Northwest or North Central Arkansas because they had the NWA on their poster. So to get that moment with guys that I love, with James Beard and Jack Stane, and get in the ring, and again at this point, Jax and I have wrestled I don't know how many times, who knows, how many dozens and dozens of times, and to finally get that moment, it was huge. Like I said, didn't know how long I was going to hold it, but I knew that I was on the list of the legends of wrestling to me. It was very emotional. It still is when I think about it. And, I think Mick Foley, I think it was in the first Mick Foley book when he had a match and he talked about something happening in the match, and he said he stood up and he took a slow turn. And as he stood up, and he said he could see this huge arena of people standing up as he turned. And they said, what did you think about that? And he said, that's the highest point that I've ever had in wrestling. And they said, well, what's your lowest point? And he said, thinking I may never get there again.
Wow.
So that's where I was at. And it's turns out I haven't and probably never will at 59. But again, high point of my wrestling career. Uh, I mean, having kids and grandkids and all those things, you can't compare. That's different. That's just a whole different ball game.
Mhm.
But wrestling was, it's not. The very first thing I did for Lightning One, when Billy made the purchase, and I went out to California and defended it at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. I used the term, this is my mountaintop.
Yeah.
And I love wrestling. Every time I get in the ring, it's an honor. It's a privilege because I honestly don't know. I tag everything these days with, I appreciate every single time, thankful every time, because you don't know if you're going to get another chance. And, that was my mountaintop.
And not to
Unless
be
I win it
cliche,
again, it's going to remain my mountaintop.
not to be cliche here either, because like, obviously that's a great attitude to have too. But I do think, and I personally, I think you might be selling yourself a little bit short because you've done so much, after that even farther. But like, let's say that was all it was, right? That one amazing moment. It's like the one hit wonder arguments. Like, how many hits has 99.9% of the world had? A one hit wonder is one more hit than almost anybody else in the world had. You having that one special moment is more than thousands and thousands of wrestlers have dreamed about having and couldn't, like. And again, that's not a shot at them, of course, but it's such a special moment, such a special
It
moment.
is, and so many things have to happen, have to align to get you there. I actually made this statement this weekend. I have never, and I will never retire from professional wrestling.
Oh
I
wow,
won't.
that's great. That's great news.
Well, now I may happily ride off into the sunset. I may just, and it's got, like, again, we've joked about this, but like I've I have talked about being done active ring competitor for off and on for a long time, and that's just that comes down to pain management and but it's you just can't replicate that. See, I love every time I sit at that announce table and I watch some of the best wrestling in the world. And I probably because it's a tough call. I'd probably trade it for one match and on a pay-per-view as opposed to sitting there watching 21 matches and calling them. And I love calling them, but it's just nothing replaces being in the ring, competing, and being in front of the fans. And it's just an addictive, amazing thing. I will never retire from. I don't want to be the guy that comes back from retirement 38 times. I'm sorry, 37. I was told a long time ago that odd numbers are funnier. I don't know why, but so I actually told Billy this weekend, I will never retire.
That's awesome. And what you said, just the first person I think of is Jerry the King Lawler. We did an interview with Caprice Coleman, and I don't know
pause. I love Caprice Coleman. Okay,
great guy. One thing that he brought up was like his goal, what he hopes to do, and what he's doing right now. He does commentary for Ring of Honor, and he wrestles on the Indies, just like you do commentary for the NWA. And you wrestle on the Indies, and of course, the main person people think of for that, Jerry the King Lawler. He did commentary for WWE, and he was wrestling every weekend for WWE. So I can see, or for on the Indies, I can see that kind of comparison, and that's just a love of the game. Like when you're doing that, that's real love and passion.
It's what I mean. I defended the NWA World Title against Jerry Lawler 5-6 years ago.
That's cool.
And his passion for wrestling, his knowledge of wrestling, that you have to love it. You have to love it, period. Because people that don't love it very quickly disappear because it's not worth the pain or the money loss or the road miles or you name it. Jerry Lawler, I know he had his last match or whatever, and then has wrestled since then because you just can't. Skandar Akbar told me it's like you hear about being in the mafia. He said, wrestling, there's only two ways out. They either stop booking you or you die. That's it.
I love it. I love it. And just shout out to Jerry the King Lawler. Kicked out of another crazy health issue. I know he's still recovering, but every time it seems like he's out for the count, he manages to kick out and ends up doing okay. So our thoughts are with him. Could you talk a little bit about your match with him? Because I did not have that in my notes. I lied earlier. I said I didn't have your Japan match in my notes. I went through my notes. I do have it, and I didn't realize it, so I apologize for that. But I don't have the Jerry the King Lawler match, I don't think, in the notes. So could you talk about that, please?
We wrestled in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which, again, this was for Matt Riviera and traditional championship wrestling. And a lot of discussion went into that. Not necessarily my discussion, because, there's probably not a bigger fan favorite than Jerry Lawler. And I don't remember. I remember one of his promos said he's in the Guinness Book of World Records for most wrestling titles. And I don't know if that's true, but he gave a number that was phenomenal. I mean, it was huge, and it's probably accurate if you think about it. Just in Memphis alone.
Memphis, yeah.
There was a lot of discussion. There was even some talk about, would I be willing to drop it without NWA permission? And the answer, of course, was no, I would not. But we did a classic Memphis finish, and I worked the heel roll. James Beard was the ref, and by heel roll, I mean just the more aggressive roll, and he was a joy to work with. You never have you hear both sides, but you hear about Jerry Lawler's punch, and I mean, the guys, to me, and I've worked matches with him, I don't know, a dozen times, a consummate professional, old school as you can get. And once he has confidence that you're decent or good and will take care of him, will turn over the reins as much as need be. And I think he's wrestled so many matches, he probably, I don't know that he would remember any of them with me, but I know in the last one, for that one, we did 4 or 5 minutes, and he went, all right, the rest is up to you, let's go. And
wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's so cool. And you brought up his punches, and for my money, Jerry the King Lawler is probably the best punch of all time. I'll throw him up there. Scott Hall, Terry Funk. Speaking of, it's funny because you brought up the fact, it can go one of two ways, with the punches. And Mick Foley recently told the story, and I just thought it was hilarious. Obviously not to me, although I'd love to talk to him. He told the story of Terry Funk was his favorite person to watch throw punches, and he used to watch him so closely. And then when he finally became friends with Funk, and he asked what the secret was, and he found out they're just all potatoes, which I just think is hilarious.
That's in his first book too.
Oh, all right.
He said he was so excited. I think it was in Japan. He said, I was so excited. He said, I saw Terry reach the big left hand back, and I was about to learn the secret of the great Terry Funk punch. And then I realized he just hit me as hard as he could in the forehead. So, who was it? I'm drawing it. It wasn't Jimmy Hart, was it?
Yeah, that broke his jaw, right?
Broke his jaw.
Yeah.
My head's so hard. I'm not saying he couldn't break my jaw, because you never challenge anybody. It's like telling a massage therapist, "Oh, you're fine. You won't hurt me," because they can't hurt you. But consummate professional, and he threw a drop kick at whatever age he was, and better than I can do. I'm not leaving my feet for anybody, not on purpose.
Tim, it's been a delight so far. We still got some more questions before we get out of here. As you can tell, the way these interviews go, I was hoping to, finish up, and we are 45 minutes in, 50 minutes in, and we are up to, I don't know, like 2017. So I appreciate your time. It's just the way my interviews go. I always drag people into random tangents. I'm not good at just, hitting the high spots and getting out of there. That's just not my style.
Well, and I'm not very good at, if you ask me a question, you may get 15 minutes of an answer. So
yeah. I love that. I like getting in the weeds. With the ownership change.
Mhm.
You were in an interesting position because of being the champion at the time. I know there was a lot of issues, and obviously, I don't know how much you knew about it, how involved you were, and you don't have to talk about those issues because I know some of them were legal issues.
Mhm.
David Marquez touched on that a little bit, and we don't need to dive into that. But what was it like going from Bruce Tharpe to Billy Corgan? And before it, did you know Billy Corgan? Like, I'm sure you knew of him, but did you know him personally before he made the purchase?
I can bury myself. I knew absolutely nothing. No, I didn't. I mean, as far I know you and I have not talked about. I've told this story, but I was in my classroom. I had my phone on my desk. Um, I mean, of course, silenced, whatever. And my students, I don't know what they were doing, testing or something. And this was, in Cauliflower Alley, the big Las Vegas get together, and which is where I guess the transaction became official. And for some reason, like my phone just started blowing up. And I mean, just constant, just phone call, phone call, phone call, message, voice message, text, text, text. I mean, it just doesn't stop. But I'm in my classroom, so I got my phone right here. If I grab my phone and I'm trying not to do too much, and I'm looking down, and I got everything from, hey, what happened? Did you know about this? I knew nothing. And I know there was basically, what is it? The silence where there was not, that it was not allowed to go public until it became official that Billy Corgan bought the National Wrestling Alliance. And, my first thought was, well, it's been a good run, you know?
Oh, wow.
They don't know me. I'm whatever I am at that time, 50. I don't know, 50. I know I wanted it 53, I think, something like that. And I held it for over a year. So I'm probably 55, or I don't know, whatever the age is. And I'm like, they're not, these guys obviously know wrestling. They've both been with Impact. They're very quickly going to make a title change. And I told myself, as long as it's done, as long as it doesn't hurt me, I'm a professional. I have no problem with that. Man, this is where I get in trouble. So I had to look up, sorry, Billy. I had to look up Smashing Pumpkins, because I told you I was a rap guy, and I know, hard to believe. Well, here you go. Ironically, Sugar Hill Gang. I don't know.
Perfect.
I had to look up the wrestling history and what was the involvement, and all that kind of stuff, because that was all new to me. I had heard of the Smashing Pumpkins. I probably could have named a couple of songs at best. Mm-hmm. And the first couple of conversations, I am me, and I try to be a man of my word. And I guess that's what got their attention. I think Nick told me later on, or maybe it was in an interview, where Nick said, they did some interview stuff with me, and Nick said, well, who is this guy? And he said, well, he's no Ricky Steamboat. Now, at the time, I was like, oh, and I look back now and go, but who is Ricky Steamboat? Right? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Who is a Ricky Steamboat? Be a better way to put it. But man, they did me better than I could have ever, presented me in a way that I could never have presented myself. And all of a sudden, like the first edition of 10 Pounds of Gold came out, and a lot of people were like, who's this guy? What is he? A Texas guy who wrestles in Texas, in that area out there. Okay, that's great. But how old is he? Why is your granddad the world champion? It was very, very negative. And after the first episode, the way that they presented that and the way they put it together was so amazingly professional and well done that it gained momentum really, really fast. And a lot, there's always going to be negativity. That's just the way, some people are, but it, it did me more good than anything I could ever done. And I think I made the statement, how many people out there at whatever age I was, 55, 56, how many people get their biggest push in professional wrestling at that, at that late age. And they picked Nick Aldis as the first opponent, and we could not have, as far as our styles, or our personalities as wrestlers were great chemistry. He is amazingly talented, much better wrestler. And actually, I had somebody at that time say, well, after your first match, did you sit Nick down and help him? I'm like, no, he sat me down and helped me.
That's awesome.
Because, and his comment after we actually ran into each other at the airport after the match. And because I was not happy with the way the finish went off on my part, not his. And he said, well, let's, at 19, 20 years old, he said, I was wrestling some of the best wrestlers in the world, and they were pouring into me.
Yeah.
Kurt Angle, Sting, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, all these guys that were pouring information into him. And, but the Nick Aldis heel against the Tim Storm face was really good chemistry.
It was magic. It was incredible. If I'm lucky enough to have a third interview with you in the future, because there's no way we're finishing, not even close. I definitely want to dive more into that if I get the opportunity. And I'd love chatting with you. You're a delight. So thank you again for this. Before we get on out of here, because I do want to talk about your entire feud with him. I really want to talk about Josephus in the future, and of course more on the transition to commentary. But before we cut things off, Billy Corgan, when he took over, and you said you started having those conversations with him, did he lay out his vision of the NWA to you? Because, I know there's a reputation. For example, Vince McMahon had a reputation of, or other wrestlers, if you didn't have a close relationship with Vince McMahon, you weren't necessarily going to get the push. You were going to have those phone calls with him where he's going to discuss visions. You're going to see where they're going. Is that something you had with Billy? Would he call you up and be like, okay, this is what I foresee the NWA's future being. This is why I bought it. This is what I want from it. Was that conversations you had? Or was it more just, hey, you're our champion. This is what we're going to do, and we'll go from there?
Yeah, somewhere in between.
Okay.
Billy and I have a great relationship. I mean, I'm not on the booking committee. I don't, I don't plan. We had 2 or 3 really good discussions this last loop. I mean, we had, but we don't talk on the phone. We don't do that kind of stuff. That's just, Billy Corgan is a busy man, and it's his passion and his love for professional wrestling that even brings him into the circle for me. Smashing Pumpkins is a worldwide phenomenon that they're touring all the time. So we have a really good relationship. I wouldn't say it's close because we don't talk often. He knows where I stand on things, and he's never hesitant to come up this weekend. He came up and said, "What would you think about this?"
Mm-hmm.
For me, he's not asking about anything going on. He's just saying, "What would you think about this?" And I said, if you think that would benefit us as a company, as long as it makes sense, So I mean, he's not gonna throw anything at me that I don't like without at least asking me. I mean, we did a little thing our last year at GPS Studios, and he was very careful with, "Hey, are you okay with this? Is this crossing any lines that you're not familiar with, or that you're not comfortable with?" And I mean,
so he's respectful, very respectful.
Absolutely, yeah. And he doesn't have to do this, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a passion project.
It's costing him more money than I'll ever make in my life to produce and to do. I mean, this weekend was Crockett Cup, and I think there were Well, the tournament bracket was 24 tags, tag teams.
It's
So
48
that
people right there.
alone,
Yeah.
you're talking 3 or 4 times the normal roster of a regular show for other organizations, and plus all the other matches, plus all the production, plus, I mean, you name it. So he does this because he loves professional wrestling and he loves doing it. It's like mine. It's his passion. So, it's the transition from one to the other. If anybody in the world uh, of the former NWA benefited, it was me by 1,000%. And Billy, Dave Lagana, all of that, they presented me in the most positive light that they could possibly, in my opinion, present me.
Awesome. Tim, thank you so much. The question, you kind of touched on it before. This is how I like to end everything before we hit plugs. I asked you this before. You kind of touched on it earlier, but I love hitting people with it. What does the future look like for Tim Storm?
I mean, in the big picture of things, my success really is, do I get to continue to do what I'm passionate about as long as I'm physically and mentally able to do those things? It's so I'm not going anywhere. I'm enjoying doing commentary. I've got the best with Joe Galley and Velvet Sky. I've got the best team.
And you're great at it, might I add, in my opinion.
Well, thank you. But honestly, it's because of those guys. I enjoy doing it and I think I'm decent at it. But, Velvet missed a taping. And for us, if you miss a taping, 2-day taping, then you've missed a season, a full 3 months, 2.5 months of viewing. And she missed one. Danny Deals filled in as a whole new chemistry that was fun and interesting. But she sat down Saturday night for the cup, and I was instantly reminded how easy it is when the three of us are together. And that's because we all know we know what we bring. We like each other. We have fun doing it. We all have strengths. And Joe's the captain of the ship, and he steers us in the right direction, makes it easy for all of us. And, so, what's the future like? As long as there's wrestling, as long as there's an NWA, and as long as I'm physically and mentally able to do it, then I'm just going to keep cruising and enjoying. And at some point, I will make the decision that, my body can't continue, whenever that is, and I don't know when that's going to be. And then I will continue to be some part of wrestling as long as long as they'll have me.
And that's what's great about your transition, because even if your body can't necessarily hold up in the ring at some point, you have the mind and you have the mouth, and that'll keep you going, which is a beautiful thing. One more time, where can people check you out?
Tim Storm 01 on Instagram, Real Tim Storm on Twitter. That's pretty much what I do. But NWA Power on Tuesdays, USA on Saturdays, Fight TV. We replay everything, and then we just finished Crockett Cup. If you haven't seen it, if you love professional wrestling, especially if you love tag team wrestling, unbelievable. I literally I felt like at every match I was going, how does it just keep getting better? Because it was really, really good. It was really fun to call.
And this will be out, I'm not sure the release date. We always do these in advance. It might end up being July, but as of June 7th, they just had an NWA Power on YouTube, which showed some matches from the show. The women's match, talked about hardcore wrestling earlier. That was so much more physical than anybody expected. So guys, check out the NWA. There's a lot of great talent there, as this channel is a testament to. Absolutely. And beyond that, guys, be sure to follow us at Armbars Sidebar on Twitter, at Armbars and Sidebars on Instagram, and on YouTube at Armbars and Sidebars. Like the video, leave a comment. I hear it helps the algorithm. I don't know. That's what I'm told. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be back with many more interviews in the future. Hopefully, we'll get Tim here again. He's a delight. Tim, I can't thank you enough, sir. You were awesome as always, and I appreciate your insight and your mind for wrestling and your passion. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy it. We'll do it again.
Awesome. And until next time, guys, later.